Happy Saturday, y'all. Josh's severe weather. Getting this out a little bit later. I apologize. Had a sick kid to deal with all night and a little bit low on sleep here, but going to keep this pretty short. But we've got a major storm that'll be impacting the eastern United States this weekend. Hate to say it, but it's another weekend in the east with lots of rain and certainly a severe weather threat. And that threat is increasing from the last couple of days, especially across Florida. So I'm going to share my screen and get right to it here and show you all what we're expecting. The increased risk of severe weather. We've got two storm systems that are going to merge into a strengthening storm over the Great Lakes into parts of Ontario over the weekend, and that's going to pull some colder air down behind it next week, which will flip the pattern. So next week, we start off a lot quieter across the central and eastern U.S. with cooler temperatures, cooler than you would be accustomed to at the beginning of May. But we still have to get there. And right now, a large area of storms over the Gulf of Mexico set to track eastward towards the Florida Peninsula and northeastern Florida later on today. And that is going to potentially fuel a few tornadoes. Probably not a major outbreak of tornadoes, but certainly we've got to be on the lookout for tornadoes with a big squall line getting set to hit Florida here later today and into tomorrow as well. Kind of two different waves coming through. This will move not quite up the coast, so not really a nor'easter, but track along the Appalachians and Piedmont region and bring that risk for severe weather up into the Carolinas very late tonight and especially tomorrow morning over eastern South Carolina and into central and eastern North Carolina, and maybe even expanding all the way to the beaches and up into Virginia here around midday tomorrow, with the threat for a few storms getting all the way up into parts of the Northeast. The first system that is going to get absorbed by this larger one could produce a few stronger storms this afternoon and early this evening over parts of the central and eastern Great Lakes region around Indianapolis and Fort Wayne. But I think the bigger chance is going to be across the south and east. So here's a look at the water vapor image. You can see this is the upper level low feature here. Let me see if I can annotate this here. I'm not sure. I'm still learning. Yep. Okay. So here is the upper level low right here, Dallas-Fort Worth region. And that is kind of set to kind of take this track and then get to be an extremely bigger system here, merging with this trough that's cutting through. So this is actually going to pick this system up here and congeal into one major storm over the Great Lakes region. So that is what we're going to be tracking early next week. You can also see there's an area of thunderstorms out ahead of this main complex. This was the weather that hit Texas yesterday afternoon, evening. Actually was a little bit faster than the models projected, so things kind of moved along quicker, and that could come into play here in Florida as well. So we've got kind of two separate storm tracks that are or two separate storm convective systems, if you want to call them that. Sorry, I really did not sleep well last night. Yeah, family stuff. But anyway, these two are going to combine into one bigger upper level feature here and produce kind of two waves of severe weather across Florida and the southeast. We still have the storm that moved through the southeast yesterday, moving through the New York State region into New England. No severe weather expected with it, just going to be a wet start to the weekend in the northeast once again. And I apologize for the weather. It does not know the calendar. I feel like the weekends have just been worse than the rest of the week for many of us. And I even saw kind of a meme yesterday that I shared that it's Friday in North Carolina, so of course it's raining. So anyway, the west is going to stay pretty quiet here. Another storm will move in, bringing some mountain snow, but we've had some record heat across the valley. I think it's about 97 in Bakersfield, and Death Valley may take a run at 110, which would put it at the highest level in April. So April will end on a very hot note across the desert southwest. Here's a look at the watch and warning map. We do still have flood watches out for all the melting snow across the interior of the West, especially California, over the Sierra Nevada. The East right now, relatively quiet. We do have some dense fog advisories. The central part of the country, we do have colder air moving in, dry air as well. So some red flag warnings for burning with locally dry weather here. That could be an issue. We also have freeze watches and warnings for the next couple of nights over the Central Plains. And as our low pressure system brings in that colder air aloft, we do have a winter weather advisory for east central and northern Wisconsin into the western UP with flood watches as snow melts. So we're going to have snow melting causing flooding, and then we'll have new snow on top of it. And yes, this is why I don't live in the Lake Superior region. Mad props to those of you guys who do. There may be a few of you watching. Not my cup of tea. Let's just put it that way. All right, we saw a lot of severe weather yesterday, Big time hail in the Waco area. Once again, that was predicted. Some hail all the way up to Dallas, Fort Worth. We didn't really see any tornadoes, but there were a few tornado warnings. But really, this was a huge hailstorm. And then as we got into the overnight hours, fortunately, the worst stayed to the southwest of the Houston area. But we did have, as our storm complex went from supercells into a convective line, a mesoscale convective system, we had a lot of strong wind last night over the deep South Texas, Rio Grande Valley region. So a lot of wind damage there with wind gusts over 80 miles per hour in some of these spots here, even including the South Padre Island region. And that was very late last night. The east was relatively quiet. We did have, with our upper low, a little bit of hail and some intense winds. I did see some warnings. I'm in Raleigh, but there were warnings east of me in the evening, as well as late in the afternoon back around King and north of Winston-Salem. A little bit of wind damage, some trees down there as well, but not a big deal. I think as we get into late tonight and especially tomorrow, a bigger chance for severe weather across this region. Florida had a relatively quiet day. We did have a brief tornado in Boynton Beach. I do think there'll be a greater chance for tornadoes the next couple of days. Here's the Storm Prediction Center's forecast. Really, we're focused just on today and tomorrow for severe weather. I think there could be a little bit more when we get to the end of next week, but right now the chances are too low to really predict accurately. Slight risk across Florida in the southeast, tomorrow South Florida and in the eastern Carolinas. And we can see a marginal risk all the way into Mississippi and Alabama here today. I'm mostly concerned with Florida and southern Georgia as well, and especially this portion of Florida, especially if that squall line holds together. This is the current radar, and you can see a lot of discrete storms here out over the Gulf. Some of these are going to try to move into Mississippi and Louisiana later today. If you're watching from the Tampa Bay region, you see this one area of storms kind of dying off. It's sort of a diurnal curve where the morning hours see less intense storms, but then as we get daytime heating over land, we see these storms intensify. So obviously Central Florida's got to watch things here later today, but the second disturbance behind it could cause bigger issues here late today and tonight, and then again tomorrow as our cold front moves through. And the risk for a tornado is 5% across this area. It's possible we could see a bit of an upgrade to 10% in here. I'm not really sure. Some of the models indicate it could be kind of nasty. Certainly on the East Coast, we've got a bigger hail threat here as these storms interact with colder air aloft. Basically anywhere from about Indian River right on up through the First Coast and into southeastern Georgia to about St. Simon's Island and Brunswick here. We do have a wind threat as well across this entire region. But as we get to tomorrow, we see that risk obviously building eastward and northeastward. And this area could still climb some across the eastern parts of South Carolina. Right now, with the heating of the day and the low pressure track, we see that greater chance over North Carolina. And I'll take this up north so you can see Virginia. We also see a pretty decent chance over the southern peninsula of Florida. And some of these storms could produce some tornadoes, that 5% risk across both of our slight risk areas, and a threat for some hail as well in both areas, and certainly a threat for wind damage. And then as I take this map farther north today, you can see right now just a general area of storms in here. There may be a marginal upgrade coming in Indiana, Northwest Ohio, and far southern Michigan. I think there certainly is an argument for that. But really the main chances are going to be tomorrow as we see this storm track moving up through the Carolinas into Virginia in the afternoon, bringing some warmer, more unstable air, some more storm juice, more storm fuel, CAPE we call it, and some increasing wind aloft as well. That could include Southeast Virginia. This marginal risk here, I think, should probably start to climb northward into central Maryland and central Pennsylvania. So we're going to keep an eye on that. But right now, not really a tornado risk. I would be a little bit more concerned about severe wind and possibly some hail in this area as well. Here's our upper level pattern. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but obviously the trough in the east is the main feature. It picks up our upper low over the southeast and turns into just one ginormous upper level low pressure system right over Lake Erie here on Monday morning. That allows the cold air to continue to push south and eastward. Little disturbances kind of come around it, and that will enhance our risk for just really nasty, chilly weather, rain and elevational snow, and across around the Lake Michigan, and not really Lake Michigan, but Lake Superior and Huron regions. We'll see some snow as well. The southeast will actually enjoy this pattern. It's going to send colder weather down at night, but it'll actually be pretty dry for a while. Our next feature here over California is going to bring some mountain snow in on Wednesday into Thursday, and you can see the massive ridge over Canada. That's going to basically squash this feature from expanding quickly eastward and reduce that risk for severe weather once we get beyond the high plains here. But as this trough stays stuck here, this is a classic block over Greenland, a negative NAO, we continue to see impulses behind it, just kind of regenerating the unsettled weather pattern and the chillier weather. And the Northeast doesn't look great here next weekend either, depending on how this feature sets up. Classic omega block is what we call it. If you're a Greek fan, it's got that omega shape to it. Here is the European surface chart. You can see our low pressure system down south kind of overtakes the one in the north here. They merge into a big low pressure system over Lake Huron on Monday. So it's going to be wet tomorrow across the Northeast. We dry out tomorrow night into Monday over the Southeast, but behind it, just wraparound gunk here with snow falling across the upper Midwest, even some wet snowflakes in the mountains here as we head into the month of May. And it's nothing too unusual to see some light snow. I say light, it'll be snowing hard, but not a major accumulation in the mountains. Nothing unusual in early May. We'd like to see it warmer, obviously, but this happens. I've gone up to Beach Mountain in North Carolina many times the first weekend of May with snow on the ground. So certainly that is not unheard of, but it's anomalous. It's still chillier than average. And this low is right in the picture here, right on into Wednesday night over the Northeast. Even Thursday, just some unsettled weather here. You can see things start getting busier across the plains here late next week. We do have a system coming out of our trough here, moving southeast, and some uncertainty in the track of that. But maybe Friday and Saturday look miserable again across the mid-Atlantic and Pennsylvania. Maybe this ends up in a different spot, but the Euro's got a surface low off the mid-Atlantic that just leads to a nasty weekend here on the mid-Atlantic coast once again. So not quite great beach season weather. Whoops. Sorry about that. I was going to show you the GFS here as well. This is the 6Z run. I don't have the 12Z yet. Kind of more of the same here. You can see low pressure still in our hair right on into Thursday in the Northeast. It'll be nasty across Atlantic Canada potentially. Here's our next system moving through the Ohio and Tennessee valleys at the end of this upcoming week. And fortunately for the mid-Atlantic, the GFS is farther south with this system. That'll be at the expense of the Outer Banks and the South Carolina coast potentially. So uncertainty here on what next weekend looks like. But with this big high, I will guarantee it's going to be cooler than average again for another weekend. Maybe unsettled for some in here. And we're going to have to keep an eye on things leading up to it next Friday afternoon, evening over the southern plains and parts of the deep south. All right, so let's look at more detail with the HRRR model here, taking a look at what the day looks like today. You can see our storm complex over the Gulf. It looks like it holds together. We actually see enhancement on the East Coast here this afternoon around 4 or 5 o'clock. And then we see this system moving through Central and South Florida tonight. With the upper level low lagging behind it, we see the likelihood of another wave coming through Florida late tonight and first thing tomorrow, and maybe more severe weather. And I am concerned about a few tornadoes in here. Really tough to predict where that'll happen, but Central and South Florida look primed for that. And south of Miami, things should still be ongoing around lunchtime tomorrow, and then things will move out after that with quieter weather expected tomorrow night. I'm going to zoom in and show you Florida. And you can see, again, this is the HRRR model. It has been notoriously a little bit too slow on these storms. Yesterday in Texas, it was about an hour or two behind development and movement. So this is 3 o'clock, but things may be hitting Tampa at that point. Orlando and on east around 4 or 5 o'clock today. And then we see this line of storms probably dying down around 7 or 8 o'clock, but I wouldn't lock that in just yet. Southwest Florida could still see some nasty weather. Then we get a bit of a break here. It may still be raining overnight in South Florida, but the Panhandle sees additional storms overnight. A lower risk for a tornado, but certainly if you're in Tallahassee, Lake City, be alert for maybe a few isolated supercell type storms here late tonight between 1 and 5 a.m. But really Tampa Bay, this is going to be hitting you right around the end of the night and beginning of tomorrow, moving through the I-4 corridor in the morning, and then things will dry out behind it. South Florida, with the heating of the day, we have to keep an eye on potentially a few big hailstones and strong wind, as well as a couple tornadoes tomorrow afternoon. The timing on this, again, a bit uncertain. So really anyone in here needs to be on the alert for tomorrow, especially in South Florida. Here's a look at the Carolinas, and a quieter day today. But as we get into this afternoon across southeast Georgia and the low country of South Carolina, things start moving in from the south. We could see local tornadoes in here, lower end tornadoes. We could see strong winds and some hail. These will move northeastward through the Savannah and Hilton Head areas late today, up towards Charleston by this evening. and not a great risk for severe weather by the time they get to Myrtle and Cape Fear. Most of that will be offshore, but our next system behind this, the upper level feature, will continue to feed moisture and instability in from the southwest. So that'll lead to more rain and thunderstorms very late tonight over the Carolinas and Georgia. And tomorrow, as we move through South Carolina, in the morning, Columbia could be under the gun, as well as Florence and Myrtle Beach. And then this should be lifting away around lunchtime, just some leftover showers after that, but maybe still a thunderstorm possible. By the afternoon and evening hours, we may dry out and get some decent weather here with cooler temperatures by tomorrow night across the south and east. And then let's look at North Carolina, Virginia, and surrounding states. And let me zip this forward. Fortunately, we're looking at a good day today across this region, other than maybe a stray shower across the mountains late tonight or late this afternoon, and then also across eastern North Carolina later on this afternoon. But really, most of the action is going to be overnight tonight. We see rain moving in from the south, a few embedded storms across places like Emerald Isle and Cape Hatteras. But we'll see thunderstorms before daybreak tomorrow morning. That could wake you up in western North Carolina and southwestern Virginia. But the greater threat for severe weather is going to come towards about lunchtime here between Charlotte and Greenville, including Raleigh and Fayetteville, Jacksonville, and Wilmington, and then spreading into Virginia in the afternoon, maybe up to Richmond and Petersburg, as well as Virginia Beach and Elizabeth City. Still unsettled here right on into the second part of the afternoon. The best chance for severe weather is moving around the Richmond area and eastward towards the peninsula, the middle neck and the northern neck here towards the mouth of the Potomac. And then the threat for severe weather does wind down some at that point with a few leftover showers behind it. Should be better, though, by Monday. And then finally, let's take a look here across the Midwest. We could see some rumbles of thunder developing here around 3, 4 o'clock over central Indiana, and then moving eastward towards Toledo and then fading around 8 in the evening. I think there could be a marginal risk involved in here, a little bit of hail and some strong wind, but not a big deal, at least not by Midwest standards. The Northeast, we see improvement this afternoon. New England stays wet, though. And then overnight tonight, we see showers and a few embedded storms across parts of Pennsylvania, moving northeastward into western and central New York State. Tomorrow morning, still some showers and storms moving across eastern Great Lakes into Pennsylvania and New York. But the really nasty, heavy stuff moves in here late in the afternoon and continues through the nighttime. That's when the rain will be at its hardest over the I-95 corridor. Moving through New York City here, especially later tomorrow evening, Philly as well. And then hopefully, optimistically, this is out of our hair by daybreak on Monday. Just a few scattered showers, but the heavy stuff is moving through New England. And you can see the HRRR here over the Northeast, a wet day across New England here, especially southern New England, but then expanding into Maine tonight. Just rounds of rain, just going to make it really nasty here and cool and wet. And then we get a bit of a break tomorrow across southern New England before the next wave moves in the afternoon and overspreads the area tomorrow night. Just a really nasty setup here, continuing through tomorrow night. Should dry out Monday in the Northeast, but stay wet across parts of New England. Here's how much rain we're looking at, by the way. This is the Euro model. You can see a widespread 2 to 3 inch zone here over the Northeast and the Mid-Atlantic states, maybe 4 or 5 inches in a few spots. As this low pressure system backs into the Great Lakes, could be some heavy amounts over Wisconsin and the UP of Michigan. And a lot of that's going to be over the next 3 or so days. So will the snow. We do see west of Thunder Bay towards the U.S.-Canadian border, the threat for a few inches of snow here, and then higher amounts enhanced over the western UP and northern Wisconsin. Probably not a big deal in Madison or even Stevens Point. I mean, yeah, we could see a little snow, probably not much sticks. When you get closer to Lake Superior, though, it could be pretty nasty here. And then more for tomorrow, even a few inches possible across lower Michigan, even all the way down close to Holland, Michigan, and Grand Rapids could see an inch or snow. So this is early May. This is Monday and Tuesday, and winter is not done just yet. But the second half of the week looks a lot better. Finally, let's take a look at the Northeast and especially Canada. And right around Montreal and Quebec City, we see some flakes possibly mixed in over the higher elevations. North of Quebec City, looking pretty nasty here in these higher elevations. Northern Nova Scotia and far eastern Quebec, and even far eastern parts of Nova Scotia, I said New Brunswick, I meant to say, do have the threat for seeing locally 10 to 20 centimeters of snow. A lot of that's not going to stick, though. It's just a little bit too warm on the ground. Thank you so much for your time today. I hope you have a blessed weekend. Today is an exciting day for me, even though I didn't sleep very well, and that's totally unrelated. But my church community does an annual spring carnival that about 1,000 families with children with special needs attends. Something near and dear to my heart as a believer in God and a believer in Christ, knowing that we can bless a community through this event. If you're interested in it and you have special needs families in the Triangle area, let me know and I can give you the address. But God looks at people differently than how we look at people. 1 Samuel 16:7. But the Lord said to Samuel, do not look on his appearance or on the height of his stature, because I have rejected him. For the Lord sees not as the man sees. Man looks on the outward appearance, but the Lord looks on the heart. It's very powerful as God anoints David as the king, who is very unlikely to be the king. But because God has created all of us, whether or not you believe in that, we need to, if we are believers, we need to use different eyes than we would kind of, I guess, look through the world, to instead look through God. God blesses families who have people with special needs in them, autism and Down syndrome and similar disorders, because he gives them kind of that spiritual gift and uplifts them in that struggle that they go through. And I see this struggle every year when I work with these folks. Not just at the annual carnival, but we have members of our congregation who have special needs families. But he gives us the gift to accept people where they're at and to show them God, to show them Christ. That's why I do what I do every day. It's to serve others. God has anointed me to share the word with you guys. Even though I'm a meteorologist, that's the spiritual gift given to me. He's anointed me to share my faith with you, just to show you how powerful he is. And the sacrifices made for us by God, sending his son to die on the cross for us to give us eternal life. And that applies to people who have been gifted, who have been given all kinds of gifts physically, intellectually, but also people with intellectual disabilities. They also have gifts, and we are to serve them. And it just really excites me that I can pour out my heart into them and to help out. And I'm just part of a larger community that does this, but I'm excited about it. And, if you are somebody in need of prayer, you have a family member who maybe is in that situation, or you are yourself, I'm happy to pray for you because you are very important in my eyes. Thank you so much for your time today. If you haven't subscribed and you're still watching, please do that, and look forward to chatting with you again early next week. Hope you have a blessed weekend and stay dry out there. Take care.